To start crocheting the walls, find the nearest stitch to the tip of the yarn that we have here. So for example, this one. And you see on the side of the circle we have such V stitches. So crocheting the walls, we will insert, crocheting the first row of the walls, we will insert the hook in the middle of the V and under all the bumps on the back side of the circle. Like this. Now take the yarn from the skein, hook the working yarn and take a loop. Hook the working yarn and push it through the loop on the hook. This is the first stage of the walls of the future bag. Every time we will insert the hook the same way, in the middle of the V and under all bumps. Then, to hide these tips, we put them above the hook, like this. Now, hook the working yarn, take a loop, hook the working yarn and push it through both loops on the hook. So we are in this row we are making single crochet into every stitch. Again, we insert the hook into the next V here on the side of the circle. Then again we put the tips above the hook to hide them inside the crochet. Then hook the working yarn, take a loop, hook the working yarn and push it through both loops on the hook. So we're getting just normal single crochet. Into the next one, inside, in the middle of the V, under the bumps, then we put the tips above the hook, hook the working yarn, and make a stitch into the next one. Now our tips are hidden, and continue crocheting the stitches all the way around the circle until we come to the beginning of this row. So I've came to the beginning of the row, and now we will join this row the same way as we joined the rows in the circle. So we make a loop on the hook a little bigger. Then we insert the hook under the first V of this row on the back side, hook the loop and bring it to the back side and make chain 1. And in the second row of the walls of the back, we will crochet the same pattern as we crocheted in the circle. For that, we insert the hook the same as we did it in the circle. First, we insert it under the same V where we just joined the first row. Same way. Hook the working yarn and take a loop. Now insert the hook into the same place where we made the V of the first row. So right here. Then hook the working yarn and take a loop. You will get the same 3 loops on the hook as you had when you crocheted a circle. Then hook the working yarn and push it through all the loops on the hook. So we've got the same stitch as we made in the circle. Then into the next stitch. Again, we insert the hook under the V, hook the working yarn and take a loop. Now again we insert the hook at the same place where we made this V from the first row. So right here. Hook the working yarn and take a loop. Now we have 3 loops on the hook. Hook the working yarn and push it through all the loops on the hook. We made the second stitch. Under the next V, the same way. Now at the same place where we made the V from the first row, hook the working yarn and take a loop. So this way we crochet the second row all the walls, the second one and the last one. So continue crocheting the second row until we come to the beginning. And the last stitch we make into this joining from the first row, the same way as we did it when we crocheted the circle. So we have finished the second row, and it's also the last row of the walls, all the back. Now we need to measure 6 lengths of the circle and then cut the yarn. So 1, 2, 6, and then cut the yarn. Pull out all the yarn. And now we need to join this row that I will also use a needle with a big eye. First we insert the needle under the first stitch of the row. The first V is this one, it's not this one. Again, I remind you that the first stitch is between the first and the second stitches. And now we need to bring the needle back to the same stitch, to the same V, where our yarn comes from. So we made the last stitch and joined the row. And the first part of the bag is ready. This long tip of the yarn we will need to crochet two parts of the bag together. So now you need to make the second part of the bag the same way, but don't leave here the long tip. When you make the second part of the bag, leave a short tip and cut the yarn. Then pull out the tip and finish this row joining the same way as we've just joined the last row in the first part. So again, I use a needle with a big eye. Then we insert the needle under the first stitch and the first V of the row and bring it back to the same stitch where it comes from. And here in the second part, just hide the rest of the yarn, hide the tip under the stitches from the back side of the bag. Just push it under the stitches and then cut the rest of the tip. In the second part of the bag we don't need a long tip. We will do everything with this one. So two parts of the bag are ready, and now we will use this long tip of the yarn that we left when we crocheted the first part to crochet two parts together. But first we should decide where we will sew a zipper, and I counted all my stitches around the circle. It's 42 stitches, And for the zipper we have to take less than half of the stitches. So the zipper should take less than half of the circle, of the length of the circle. So if I have 42 stitches, half of them will be 21. Then I will take 18 stitches, for example 18 stitches for my zipper. And first I want to mark that distance where I will sew my zipper in the future. I will start counting from this stitch where I have my working yarn. So this stitch I will count as the first one, and I will put a stitch marker on it, not to lose it. And now I start counting 18 stitches. This is the first one. 1, 2, 3. So this is the 18th stitch. I put a stitch marker on it too. And now I know that here I will sew a zipper in the future. That means that along this distance I will not crochet these two parts together. I should leave it for the zipper. So first we start from this stitch, from the first stitch for the zipper. Insert the hook under this V, hook the yarn, take a loop, and now we make slip stitches along all the distance for the zipper until we get the last this stitch with the second stitch marker. So again we make slip stitches. For that we insert the hook under the next V, hook the working yarn and take a loop, and push this loop through this one, under the next one, and the last stitch we make in under this V where we have the second stitch marker. So here we will have a zipper, and from this place we will start crocheting two parts together. But that first pull out the tip . Take off the stitch marker, and now insert the hook under the same V where we had a stitch marker from the back side, hook the yarn and just bring it to the back side. Now we can start crocheting two parts together. To make this process easier and neater, I advise you to take a smaller hook. For example, I took 5mm hook. And the first step, we insert the hook in the middle of the V, under which we've just brought the yarn to the back side, into this V. Now we insert the hook in the middle of a V from the second part of the back. You can choose any V on the second part, but I've decided to choose the one where I made my last joining when I crocheted this part. You see, it doesn't look very neat here, so I want to hide it and to start crocheting two parts together from this place. So we insert the hook in the middle of the V on the second part of the bag. Now we hook the yarn, and first we push it through the first stitch and then through the second stitch. Don't rush. Through the first one and through the second one. Next, again, we insert the hook in the middle of the next V of the first part, then in the middle of the next V on the second part, hook the yarn, push it through the first stitch, then through the second stitch, and then push the yarn, this loop, through this one, through the one we already had on the hook. And we repeat again. We insert the hook into the next V of the first part, into the next V of the second part, hook the yarn, push it through one stitch, second stitch, and through the loop on the hook. Let's try again. Insert the hook into the next V of the first part, into the next V of the second part, hook the yarn, push it through the first stitch, through the second stitch, and through the loop on the hook. Next, and you see, we are getting such a braid between two parts of the bag. And here we will have a zipper. So now we just should continue crocheting two parts together the same way until we get a stitch marker that shows us the place where we will start sewing a zipper into our bag. And the last stitch we make into this V where we have a stitch marker. Take it off. Now I want to join this joining braid that we've just crocheted with this border along the edge of the first part of the bag. For that I need to make one more stitch here to join them. So for that, pull out the yarn, and I will use a needle with a big eye, but you can do the same with your hook. So first we insert the needle under this V, under the first stitch of this border, like this. And now we bring it back into the same stitch, into the same V where our yarn comes from. So right here. So we made one more stitch. And now we will crochet the same border, but on the second part of the back. And we get back to our 6mm hook. As you remember, to crochet a border, we insert the hook into these holes between these stitches. Here, here, the same way as we did it with the first border, this one. But first we need to insert the hook under the back loop of this V. That was the last stitch of our joining braid. Into this V we've just made one more stitch, remember? So we insert the hook under this back loop of this V and then into the first hole. Hook the yarn, take a loop and push this loop through this one. And then we continue crocheting the border the same way as we did it on the first part. So we insert the hook into the next hole, hook the yarn, take a loop and push this loop through this one. Into the next hole, hook the yarn, take a loop and push this loop through this one. Into the next one. And the last stitch. And now pull out the yarn. To make it look complete here, we should make 2 more stitches. And for that, again, I will use a needle with a big eye. And first, we insert the needle under the first V of our joining braid. this one. And bring it back into the same stitch, the same V, where our tip of the yarn comes from. So we've just made this stitch. We've joined the border on the second part of the bag with this joining braid. And one more stitch. For that we insert the hook from the back side into this last V of the border on the first part, on the back side. Then again we insert the needle under this stitch, the first stitch of our joining braid, the one we just used for the first stitch. So again under the same V. And again we bring it back into the same stitch where the tip comes from. So this is it. We have finished our crochet, and the rest of the yarn you can just hide inside the bag under the stitches, just pushing it under the stitches. So our bag is almost ready. And the next step is to sew a zipper into it.